I had no idea that a broken clay pot would change my life forever. I was 23 years old, walking through a forest that smelled of rain and wild jasmine, thirsty enough that my throat felt like cracked earth. The expedition had been my father's idea, a morning ride through the jungle, just the two of us, the way we used to when I was a little girl and the world still felt safe. I was Princess Monica, only daughter of the Sun Dynasty, heir to Nagar, and in that moment, I was just a girl who needed water. I saw the clay pot resting in the shadow of an old tree. Something about it made the air feel heavier, thicker. But thirst has a way of silencing every instinct that matters. I lifted it, and my world broke apart. The pot slipped. It shattered against the roots. The ashes inside scattered like a whisper across the ground, and I realized too late what I was holding. These were not ordinary ashes. These were someone's wife, someone's everything. The scream that followed didn't come from me. It came from behind me, ancient and broken, and full of a grief so deep it had curdled into rage. A holy man, a tantric, his eyes like burning coal, his hands trembling as he watched his beloved's remains disappear into the dirt. He looked at me the way a man looks when his last reason for living has been destroyed. "You broke my pot," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper, but it hit me like thunder. "You scattered my wife's ashes. Now I scatter your future." I begged. I dropped to my knees right there in the mud, and I begged him the way I had never begged for anything in my life. I told him it was an accident. I told him I was sorry. I told him I would do anything, give anything, build him a shrine if he wanted. But grief that old doesn't hear apologies. It only knows consequence. "Before the last ray of today's sun disappears," he said, "you will be locked inside the nameless Haveli. And you will stay there, trapped, silent, stone, until someone walks into that fire for you without caring whether they live or die." My father arrived minutes later, breathless, flanked by soldiers. He fell to his knees beside me and begged with every ounce of royal dignity he had ever carried. He told the tantric I was innocent at heart, that I still thought like a child even at my age, that I didn't deserve this. The old man listened. His eyes softened for just one moment. "The curse cannot be undone," he said, "but it can end. The day someone enters that Haveli and walks toward her without caring whether they survive, that day she goes free." Then the sun dipped below the horizon, and I was gone. I became stone, not dead. That would have been easier. I could still see. I could still hear. I could feel the cold of the shelf where I sat, the weight of my own helplessness pressing down on me like something alive. I was a small stone doll, maybe 8 inches tall, placed on a windowsill in a Haveli that no one had entered in years, maybe decades. I didn't know how long I had been there. Time moves differently when you can't speak, can't move, can't do anything except cry. My tears were real, at least. Stone on the outside, human on the inside. Every night I wept, and my tears dried on my stone cheeks like rivers on a drought-cracked map. The other toys around me, the stone monkey, the frozen lion, the still figures in the corners. I knew, the way you sometimes know things without anyone telling you, that they had been people once. They weren't decorations. They were prisoners. Each one carrying a story I would slowly piece together during the endless nights when the Haveli came alive with fire and screaming and the smell of old sin. Because every night, a fireball appeared in the center of the Haveli. Not the fire of warmth, the fire of punishment. It moved through the rooms like a living creature, licking the walls, curling around the stone figures, burning them without destroying them. A punishment that never ends because the sin that caused it was never paid for in full. I would learn the story eventually. I had no choice but to learn it. There was nothing else to do but watch and listen and understand. Her name was Mandakini. She had run a place called the Red Haveli in a village not far from here, and she had offered the poor farmers a service that sounded like kindness. "Leave your savings with me," she told them. "Leave your daughter's wedding money. I will keep it safe, and when the day comes, I will give it back with something extra from my own pocket, because that is what a good woman does for her community." They believed her. Why wouldn't they? She had a warm smile and a clean reputation, and a Haveli that gleamed in the afternoon sun. They trusted her with their daughters' futures. There was a farmer named Bhavin. 3 daughters, all grown, all beautiful, all ready for marriage. He had worked himself nearly to death to save enough money for their wedding ceremonies, and he trusted Mandakini the way you trust someone when you have no reason not to. The day his daughters were dressed as brides, he went to collect what was his. Mandakini closed the doors. She led them into the back room, the dark one, the one with no windows. She locked them in. And then she said the thing that still echoes in my stone ears. "Everything that enters my vault belongs only to me." Bhavin begged. His daughters wept in their wedding clothes, those bright, hopeful reds and golds, and none of it moved Mandakini at all. She set the room on fire. 3 brides, their parents, all gone in the same hour they were supposed to begin their lives. The curse that fell on Mandakini after that was not something any tantric cast. It was something the universe itself decided. She and her entire family were pulled into the nameless Haveli and turned to stone, condemned to feel that fire every single night for eternity, or until the person they had destroyed most completely came back in another life and chose to forgive them. I was that person, Bhavin's eldest daughter. That had been me, in another life I didn't remember. The wedding that never happened, the groom who waited and waited, and eventually couldn't bear the waiting anymore. 2 souls yanked out of the world before their story could finish. We had been given another chance. His name was Shivam. He was 17, older brother to a small, stubborn boy named Vikram who had spotted me through the Haveli window during a hunting trip and decided, with the absolute certainty of an 8-year-old, that he needed that doll. Shivam had followed his brother inside just to keep him out of trouble. And that was when he saw my tears. Stone dolls don't cry. He knew that. He stood in front of me for a long moment, his face cycling through confusion and then something deeper, recognition, maybe the kind that lives in the body before it reaches the mind. Before he could touch me, a figure appeared in the shadows. A Chudale, a spirit woman, blocking his hand. "If you touch her now," she said, "she turns to dust. You want her free? Then find the secret your mother buried in the palace basement. Find the book. That is the only way." Shivam went home carrying two mysteries, the secret in the palace and the doll who cried. He found his mother, Queen Chandramukhi, and he asked her directly. She tried to deflect. She tried to distract him. But Shivam had seen something that couldn't be unseen, and he pushed until she broke. There was a book, white, locked, kept in the underground chamber of their palace, sealed with a key that had been hidden years ago in the Ruttenkari forest, placed there on the advice of a tantric who had warned that what was inside would bring danger to whoever read it, but that their bloodline was the only one that could ultimately resolve it. His mother had been too afraid to try. She had hidden the key to protect her sons. Shivam rode out the next morning. He nearly died in the Ruttenkari forest. There was a peacock, wounded, bleeding in the undergrowth. Shivam stopped, and this says everything about who he was. He stopped mid-mission to treat the animal. He used the medicinal paste his mother had pressed into his hands before he left, the one meant for his own injuries. He gave it away without thinking. The peacock recovered. And then it wasn't a peacock anymore. An old sage stood where the bird had been, watching Shivam with eyes that held centuries of patience. "You've been expected," the sage said quietly. "The moment was written long before you were born." He directed Shivam to the Neel tree, the one that held a hidden passage inside its trunk. Through that passage was a mountain that glittered like compressed starlight, and suspended at its center, above an impossible narrow ledge flanked by sheer drops into nothing, was the key. Shivam crossed that ledge the way you cross something when you are more afraid of failing than of dying. Inch by inch, every step an act of will. When he reached the key and closed his hand around it, the chasm on either side simply filled. The ground rose to meet him, as if the world itself was rewarding him for not turning back. He brought the key home. His mother took him to the basement. He opened the white book. And in the way that enchanted things sometimes work, the book pulled them both inside its pages and showed them everything. Bhavin, the three brides, the red Haveli, the fire, the curse. All of it, laid out like a story that had been waiting years to be read. When they came back out, Shivam sat with the weight of it for exactly 10 minutes. Then he told his mother he needed to sleep. But sleep didn't come for him either. He rode to the nameless Haveli in the dark. What he saw that night was what I had been living every night since I arrived. The fireball moved through the rooms. It burned without consuming. The stone figures twisted in silent agony that no one outside could hear. And there I was on the windowsill, untouched by the fire, because whatever curse had been placed on me was different, separate, personal. Shivam watched the fire. He watched me, and then something shifted in his face. I saw it from my frozen perch. Something settled into certainty. Not bravery, exactly. More like acceptance. More like a man who has already made a decision that his mind hasn't caught up to yet. He walked into the fire. The moment his foot crossed the threshold, I felt it, a cracking sensation, like ice breaking up in spring, and then warmth flooding back into my limbs, and then the world rushing in, sound and smell, and the desperate physical relief of being able to breathe on my own terms again. I was standing on the windowsill, no longer stone. He was looking at me as if he had known my face his whole life. "How," he said, "does a woman become a doll?" We stood in that burning room, and I told him everything. He listened the way only certain people listen, completely, without interrupting, without deciding what it meant before I'd finished. When I was done, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Mandakini's family has been burning in here for years. That's not justice anymore. That's just suffering." He was right. I knew he was right. But knowing isn't the same as knowing what to do. The tantric appeared before we had finished speaking. Not the family curse, the original one, the man from the forest who had turned me to stone. He looked different here, in this haunted light. Smaller, somehow. Older. "I knew who you were the moment I saw you," he said to me. "My own teacher had told me. The girl who comes to you and breaks the pot. Do not turn away from your grief. Use it. Send her here. Because she is the only one who can end what Mandakini started." I stared at him. "You cursed me on purpose?" "I sent you where you needed to be," he said. "There is a difference, I suppose, though it didn't feel like one in that moment. The Lal Sino, the red jewel that can free this family, it is not an object. It was never an object. It is you, your eyes, your forgiveness, falling in moonlight on this house. That is all it takes. That is all it has ever taken." We went to the Ganga that night, Shivam and I, because the tantric said we had to. We knelt at the water's edge, and our reflections appeared side by side, and then the river lit up with colors that had no names, and Gangama rose from the water looking at us with an expression I can only describe as relieved. "You found each other again," she said. She explained what the book had only hinted at. Two souls, one story, one interruption. A wedding that should have happened and didn't. A grief so total that it echoed forward through lifetimes. "You were Bhavan's daughter," she told me, "and this man waited for you. When you didn't come, he followed you." Shivam didn't say anything, but he reached out and held my hand in the dark by the river, and somehow that was enough. Somehow that said everything about the kind of man he was. Not dramatic, not performative, just present. Just there. "Forgive her," Gangama told me. "Not for her sake. For yours. For his. For the version of you that died in a burning room in a wedding dress and deserves to rest." I forgave Mandakini. I won't pretend it was simple. I stood in front of that Haveli in moonlight with Shivam beside me, and I looked at the stone figures frozen in the windows. The family that had watched their mother since swallow them whole, who had spent lifetimes burning for something they hadn't done themselves. And I found, somewhere underneath the anger and the grief and the injustice of it all, something quieter. Something that had been waiting. I let go. The moonlight fell through my eyes and into the Haveli the way the tantric had said it would, and every stone figure in that building shuddered once, a full-body tremor, and then shattered. Outward, not in destruction but in release, like a breath held too long finally let out. The fire died. The screaming stopped. The nameless Haveli stood silent for the first time in more years than anyone could count. They were free, and strangely so was I. Shivam brought me to his palace. He stood before his parents and said simply, "I want to marry her." His mother looked at me, really looked at me, and smiled in a way that told me she had been waiting for this too, even if she hadn't known it. But I had one condition. I needed to see my father first. We rode to Mohannagar together. My father was standing at the gates when we arrived, as if something had told him to wait there, as if he had felt, in whatever mysterious way fathers feel things about their daughters, that today was the day. When he saw me, this man who had ruled a kingdom without flinching, who had negotiated treaties and commanded armies, collapsed to his knees and wept like a child. He held me for a long time. He shook Shivam's hand for even longer. The wedding happened in the season when the jasmine blooms, that same jasmine I had smelled in the forest the morning everything changed. Two kingdoms joined. Two souls finally in the same place at the same time. A story that had waited lifetimes to reach its ending. And on the night of the wedding, I stood at the window and looked up at the stars and thought about a girl in a burning room in a red and gold dress, and I told her it was over now. I told her she could rest. I told her the man she had been waiting for had found her after all, that he had walked into fire for her without caring whether he came out, and that sometimes the universe is slow, but it is not cruel. Not permanently, not if you keep moving forward through the stone and the dark. She rested, and I began.